have you ever come across a really nice chair and just wondered to yourself, I wonder how old this is? So it doesn't obviously affect how comfortable the chair is, but sometimes it really helps you understand a bit more about the heritage of why the design is like it is, the materials it's made from, and it might even help you if you choose to recover things. So obviously this thing is not a science when it comes to dating, it's more of an art form. But the way that I kind of like to think about it is when you're dating stuff, put it into questions. You know that the kids game of 20 questions, where you keep asking questions until you get closer and closer to the answer. I would do the same thing with chairs. So the first thing to do is probably with this chair to have a look at the style. Now the style of this is a classic William and Mary armchair. Now how do we know that? This was a time when things were, the floor wasn't covered, it was just fireplaces. You wanted a cozy chair. And so you've got this really high back and you've got these nice baffled sides. And all of that, as you face it towards the fireplace, will keep you toasty and warm. But of course, the upholstery on this, while it might look old, probably isn't going to be from the time of William and Mary. It's about sort of 1700. So we need to sort of have a little bit look at this again. Now, remember that chairs, although chairs have evolved over the years, classic styles have remained classic. So this could be 300 years, 200 years, 100 years, it could be just 10 years old. So we need to look a little bit closer. So once we've looked at the style, let's look at the next bit of material. So before we get onto the bottom, let's have a look at these. Now, chairs didn't become padded until about the early 1700s, about the same time that this chair was originally designed. But at the time, it was just like a board, and you put down all the horsehair with a bit of cloth over the top. There was nothing more technical than that. Now, as the early 1700s, 18th century progressed, people came up with more and more clever ways to basically pad our backsides for us. And they came up with different ways of padding it. So they obviously had horsehair, but they also, initially, they started using things, other types of hair as well. They would use badger, they would use fox, they would use all sorts of different animals. And they, in fact, in the end, were outlawed. They said, no, please just stick to one material, and horsehair became the most popular. And as the years progressed, different methods became popular. So can you see on the corners of this chair where it's had the stringing around it? Again, as the 18th century progressed, they came up with a method of adding this edging around so that you could then have nice crisp corners. Now, when we get chairs, quite often we should have a look under the seat. Now, in this case, we've got a nice feather padded cushion. Now that again could be 18th century onwards. We don't have any springing, which is a good sign, because springs, they didn't come in furniture until about 1850 or so. So if you find chairs with lots of springing, either it is post 1850 or it's been reupholstered by somebody. Of course, if you're having a squish of this and it feels nice and crunchy, that's probably horsehair. This feels a bit softer, so this actually probably is more like a cotton that it's been done with, but it's still nice and firm. So this says to us that this chair is probably not a 20th century copy, this is probably a 19th century chair. Okay? And if we then look a little bit further down, let's have a look at the legs of this. Now this again is classic William and Mary, with sort of the wide legs here and the crossbanding there. But the thing is, if this were an early one, you would find that these legs would be a lot higher. Once again, this was, think about the draft of chairs. So what you want back in the day is you want the chair high enough so that the draft goes underneath the chair quite happily and doesn't affect it. You don't get cold from it. As the years progressed and we ended up with more and more rugs and more carpets, that wasn't so much of an issue. So looking at this one, it's a little bit lower down, so this is not an early 18th century example. However, that which we believe is mahogany, it looks like it's walnut, which it would have been originally, but I still think it's mahogany. This suggests that it's a 19th century version. And probably this, looking again at sort of the detailing, and if we tip the chair back, and it is always good to have a look underneath chairs, you can see a little serial number stamped on the back. Now again, the best companies were putting serial numbers and their names on stuff. Usually it's the London firms, but also things like Gillows as well. So we know that this was a really well-made chair from the 19th century, probably about 1870 or so. But this has been, as we can tell, upholstered far, far later. Now this is an absolutely classic design. This is the kind of design that just suits anybody's living room. And to be honest, if this was mine, I would reupholster it again, but I think I would choose something that was probably a very simple cotton to it, just a nice cotton tacking. So this is a great chair, and this is probably how we would date this one. And we'll have a look at some other chairs later on and see how we'd date those in comparison. Yeah,